This is the Heal Security Deep Dive.
With your hosts, Mark and Diana.
Right. We're here to dig into some of the latest security news and really try to cut through the noise and highlight what's most important for you to know.
That's right. The mission of this deep dive is to really extract those critical updates and any threats that are emerging from the sources that you've shared with us.
You know, and I think for all of us, keeping up with this stuff can just feel like a constant battle.
Absolutely.
There's just so much coming at us all the time, so we're really trying to just bring clarity and those actionable insights right to the forefront.
We want to try to provide a focused understanding of what's out there.
So let's jump in.
Let's do it.
We're seeing yet another browser vulnerability making headlines.
Yep.
This time it's Firefox being impacted.
Right.
And this one has some similarities to the recent Chrome zero-day exploit that was reportedly used in Russia. Is that right?
Yeah. So this Firefox flaw that's been discovered, what's interesting about it is that it was actually proactively found by security researchers who then issued warnings about its potential for exploitation.
Yeah, so it's good that at least there were warnings out there ahead of time.
Exactly, and it really highlights the critical role that these security researchers play in, keeping us all safe.
For sure, they're the unsung heroes.
Absolutely.
So, and the good news, or at least somewhat good news, is that Mozilla has already released a patch to address this vulnerability.
That's right, they've been quite responsive.
Which means, of course, we have to say that, if you're using Firefox, please make sure your browser's updated immediately.
Definitely.
That is like security hygiene 101.
Absolutely. Fundamental step.
Now let's shift gears a bit to phishing. There's this new Phishing-as-a-Service operation that's popped up, and they're using something called DNS-over-HTTPS, or DH, and that's pretty interesting.
Right.
Do you want to explain a little bit about how that works and why it's a concern?
Sure. So you can think of DNS like the Internet's address book, right?
Okay.
So normally when your computer goes to look up a website, that request is often visible.
Okay.
But what DNS over HTTPS, or DOH, does is it encrypts that whole lookup process.
Okay.
And so what's interesting from a threat perspective is that by encrypting those DNS requests, this phishing operation can make it harder for traditional security systems to detect and block their malicious activities because they can't as easily see where that connection is being made.
So they're kind of hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, exactly. It's like hiding their tracks in the Internet's plumbing.
I like that analogy. That's a good one.
Thanks.
All right. Moving on to web development, there's an important security alert for anyone out there using the Next.js framework.
Right.
A vulnerability has been found. It's identified as CVE 2025-29927, and the UK's NCSC has urged organizations to pay close attention to this one.
Yeah, so this CVE number that you mentioned, just so everyone's aware, it's like a standard identifier for a publicly known security vulnerability. Okay. So in this case with Next.js, it's a significant issue for developers who are using that framework. And given that Next.js is a popular framework for building web applications, this flaw could have pretty wide-ranging implications.
Yeah, I could see that.
So anyone who's using Next.js needs to look into this, investigate, and apply any necessary mitigations as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. Definitely take that seriously, developers.
For sure.
And it's not just specific software we need to be aware of. Operating systems are targets as well.
Absolutely.
And Ubuntu users, we've got some news for you. You are facing a series of security vulnerabilities right now that require a slightly different approach to addressing them, at least initially.
Right. So these vulnerabilities can actually bypass some of the existing security protections within Ubuntu.
Wow.
A little concerning.
Yeah.
And what makes this a little bit unusual is that until those official patches are released, users are going to have to rely on manual steps to mitigate those risks.
So you really have to be on top of it.
Absolutely. Prioritizing those manual mitigations is going to be really key for anyone running Ubuntu.
All right. This next development is kind of interesting. And it highlights how these cyber criminals are always evolving their tactics. And they're now exploring ways to exploit GPUs, that's the graphics processing unit in our computers, to deploy malware.
Yeah.
And they're using this method to spread a password-stealing malware called CoffeeLoader.
So what makes this technique particularly notable is that by running that malicious code on the GPU, the CoffeeLoader malware can potentially evade detection by a lot of the traditional security software, which is often focused primarily on monitoring the main processor, the CPU.
Right. Okay.
So it's like hiding in plain sight in a part of your computer that's not always under such close scrutiny.
Yeah, interesting.
And this allows the malware to then download and run additional harmful code while it's less likely to be detected, so it poses new challenge, for how we think about threat analysis.
That's really clever and concerning. Moving on to data breaches, Oracle Health has confirmed a security incident, and this is affecting several healthcare organizations here in the U.S.
Right.
And reportedly, patient data was stolen from, it sounds like, their older systems?
Yeah, so it's important to note that while Oracle hasn't made a broad public announcement about this, the data theft has actually been independently verified by Bleeping Computer.
Okay.
So it's definitely legitimate. And Oracle Health has advised those hospitals that have been impacted to really consider their obligations when it comes to hypo-regulations and patient notifications.
Oh, it makes sense.
And, the fact that this involved legacy servers suggests that older infrastructure may continue to be a vulnerable point of entry for attackers.
Yeah, it seems like that's a recurring theme.
Unfortunately.
And the healthcare sector in general continues to be just heavily targeted by these attacks.
Absolutely.
And the VanHelsing Ransomware group is reportedly increasing its attacks on critical infrastructure. And healthcare, along with finance and energy, are in their crosshairs.
Yes. So groups like Van Helsing, they really represent a significant threat because of how sophisticated their methods are becoming.
Okay.
They're known to even exploit zero-day vulnerabilities. And just to remind folks, those are vulnerabilities that are unknown even to the software vendor.
Oh, wow.
So they're really cutting edge.
Yeah.
And that makes them very difficult to defend against.
So you really have no warning.
It can be very sudden.
And that's how they can gain access and disrupt these essential services. That's scary stuff.
Absolutely. So for organizations, especially in these critical sectors, robust security measures like really good threat detection and reliable data backups, those are absolutely essential.
Can't emphasize that enough. Backups, backups, backups.
For sure.
Right. And this just reinforces how big of a problem this is in healthcare. A report from Black Book Market Research really paints a concerning picture of the global cybersecurity landscape for healthcare.
Yeah.
The report says that the U.S. is particularly vulnerable, with something like 78% of surveyed healthcare organizations saying they've experienced a cyber attack.
That's a huge number.
That's a massive number.
It really is. And the primary threat that they identified was ransomware. So, given the scale of these attacks, it really highlights the need for stronger international collaboration, more stringent regulations, and just significantly increased investment in cybersecurity infrastructure and training.
Yeah, we've got to up our game, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the technical aspects, right? We're talking about protecting electronic health records and ensuring that patient care can continue even in the face of these threats.
Yeah, people's lives are literally at stake.
Exactly. It's a global imperative.
It is, and it's not just healthcare facing these challenges.
Right.
An Australian fintech company, they recently had a data breach, and reportedly about 27,000 records were exposed due to a vulnerability in their database.
Yeah, and that serves as a reminder that these cyber threats are really pervasive, across any industry that handles sensitive data, right? So the potential compromise of financial information for so many individuals, it's a big concern. And we can probably anticipate that regulators are going to be launching an investigation into the company's security protocols and how this happened.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, so on to some slightly more positive news. It sounds like Microsoft has addressed those remote desktop issues that a lot of people were running into after some of those recent Windows updates.
Yeah, those connectivity problems, they were definitely disruptive for a lot of folks who rely on remote desktop.
Oh, yeah.
So the good news is Microsoft has released some updates designed to resolve those issues. So if you've been experiencing problems, install those latest patches. And that should restore your stable remote desktop functionality.
All right, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, back to healthcare, unfortunately. There's news of a data breach that affected CPS Solutions, and this is a company that provides services to hospitals. And the reports are indicating that unauthorized access to an employee's email account led to the exposure of some pretty sensitive consumer information.
Yeah, so this breach has actually had a ripple effect because CPS Solutions works with several hospitals, including Dayton Children's Hospital, Beacon Health, Three Rivers Hospital, and Hillsdale Hospital. So they've all been impacted.
Wow, okay.
And the company says they're in the process of notifying individuals whose information was compromised, but we don't have a firm number on how many people were affected at this point.
Yeah, this is a good example of just how interconnected, this whole ecosystem is.
Absolutely. Vulnerabilities in one place can really create risks downstream for others.
Exactly. And it's not just cyber threats that are facing the healthcare sector right now.
That's right.
Dr. Elaine Batchelor, who is the CEO of MLK Community Healthcare, has voiced some pretty significant concerns about these proposed cuts to Medicaid funding.
Yeah, so she pointed out that over 75% of their patients rely on Medicaid for their healthcare coverage. So these proposed cuts, I think it's like $880 billion, that would be absolutely devastating, for their ability to maintain essential healthcare services in their community.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen hospitals and healthcare systems struggling financially.
Absolutely. They're already under a lot of pressure.
So to take away even more funding, it's just hard to imagine how they'll be able to cope.
Yeah, it's a very real concern.
All right, circling back to cybersecurity, specifically in the UK's healthcare system, a report from Trustwave Spider Labs has ranked the UK as the third most targeted sector globally for ransomware attacks.
Well, third.
Yeah. So the report highlights a few factors that are contributing to this, including, the increasing integration of patient data across different systems, the fact that some areas are still relying on outdated technology, and then also the growing number of interconnected medical devices.
Right. Lots of potential entry points.
Yeah, for sure.
So strengthening threat intelligence capabilities, enhancing those defenses, that's critical.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that a pretty significant portion of all ransomware attacks globally are actually targeting public health and government healthcare facilities. So that's a bit of a worrying trend.
Yeah, you would think those would be the places with the strongest security.
You would hope so, but unfortunately that doesn't always seem to be the case.
All right, we've got more concerning news coming out of the U.S. healthcare landscape. Beacon Health System has disclosed more data breaches stemming from security incidents at Restorix Health, Inc. And as we discussed earlier, CPS Solutions, LLC.
So again, both of these breaches, they stemmed from unauthorized access to employee email accounts at those third-party vendors, and that led to the exposure of sensitive patient information, including names and social security numbers.
Yeah, that's never good.
It's a tough situation, and it really highlights how important it is to secure not just your own systems, but also make sure that any third-party vendors that you work with, they've got good security practices in place, because a vulnerability in their system can directly impact you and your patients.
For sure. That due diligence is crucial.
Absolutely, and the affected individuals are being advised to seek legal counsel, which, given the nature of the data that was exposed, is probably a wise step.
Yeah, definitely. On a slightly more positive note, the WHO Regional Office for Europe, they've released some new cybersecurity guidelines, and these are aimed at bolstering digital health security across its 53 member states.
Yeah, this is a really good step. They're emphasizing a more proactive approach to cybersecurity and digital health, focusing on key principles like accessibility, privacy, and really strong governance frameworks.
It sounds like they're trying to get ahead of the problem.
Yeah, trying to be more proactive, which is great, and I think it's really timely, especially given that there were over 300 reported cybersecurity incidents just in the European healthcare sector in 2023. So this is definitely needed.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. It is.
All right, and finally, we have a potentially pretty big story developing. There's a claim of a breach at Oracle Cloud itself, and a hacker is saying they've gotten access to a massive amount of data.
Yeah, the claim suggests that maybe as many as 6 million records, affecting something like 140,000 Oracle Cloud tenants, could have been compromised.
Wow, that's a huge number of people potentially.
It is, and security researchers who have looked at these claims, they've said that they actually find them pretty credible based on some patterns that they've observed across almost 1,500 organizations.
So there's some weight to this.
Yeah, it seems like there could be something to it. The alleged vulnerability is in Oracle Cloud's login endpoint, but so far Oracle has publicly denied that any incident has occurred.
So that's something we'll definitely be keeping our eyes on.
Absolutely, a developing story to watch, for sure.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that the digital security landscape is constantly changing, and there are definitely some ongoing challenges across every sector.
That's right.
We've covered a lot today, from vulnerabilities in individual browsers to large-scale data breaches impacting critical infrastructure and global healthcare systems.
And I think what really stands out to me is just how interconnected all of these threats are. A vulnerability in one seemingly small piece of software can really have a ripple effect.
Yeah. Definitely.
We saw how breaches at third-party vendors can really impact lots of different organizations.
For sure.
And the way that these attack techniques are evolving, like that whole exploiting GPUs thing, it just shows we have to constantly adapt and be really vigilant in how we approach security.
That's right. So for you, our listener, here's something to think about. In a world where these digital threats are not only persistent, but they're getting more sophisticated every day, what steps can you take? What concrete actions can you take today to make your own security posture stronger, both personally and professionally? And how might the trends we've discussed today shape your thinking about digital safety and privacy going forward? That's something we all really need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. Great questions to ponder.
All right, well, thanks for joining us for another Heal Security Deep Dive.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Mark and Diana, for the insightful session, and to all you listening, thank you for tuning in to Heal Security Dispatch Deep Dive. We're grateful for your time and hope you found today's insights valuable. Join us again on Monday for more expert updates and critical cybersecurity news. Remember to like, subscribe for ongoing coverage and analysis, and sign up for a free trial of Heal Security Desktop at healsecurity.com. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and keep your digital world secure.